Hi there. Welcome to Big Story Gazette. This is Michael. Yeah, that's me. Uh, I gotta come up with I'm gonna just start with Welcome to Big Story Gazette. Anyway, yesterday I was watching a video of this one quote spiritual channel that I follow, and I like it because it's basically uh, recorded sessions QHHT sessions, and I've shared in previous videos that I had a similar experience, years ago with a friend of mine, and I talked about that before, where I past lives, future lives, other dimensional experiences, and yada yada. So anyway, I was watching this one video yesterday, and it was a little short one, and it was basically recording a session where the client speaking, from their higher self, their larger self, was talking about a walk that they were a walk-in and they came into the body at 1 years old, and so the practitioner asked to explain how that works, and in her explanation, I was quite in alignment with that because that's data that I got from my larger self of how that process works, where I shared in previous videos in my where I've met uh, different aspects of my multidimensional self, Nemish, Zeo, Atavar. Georgianne met Nemish, Aquazar, and Raluan, and that they were just different aspects of our higher dimensional selves. And I never shared, but this is something that she and I had back in the day when we were first waking up. There was in the New Age community, there was this big thing about the Dark Lords, the dark side, and they were referred to as the Dark Lords. Uh, this whole thing about the Illuminati hadn't really come out to surface yet. It was just this ambiguous, vague phraseology of the Dark Lords, and they were like the boogeyman. And Georgianne and I, we just felt in our being, in our knowingness, and where we were coming from, or at least attempting to to position ourselves in consciousness of oneness, unity consciousness, and not the polarization. And it's just these one of the teachings of our mentor Hilarious. And so we just refer to them as the dim guys because there's only one. And as I shared in a previous video, I think it was the last one, my challenge: show me something outside of all that is. Even the Dark Lords slash dim guys are part of all that is. And so at one point, she and I considered the possibility that we had a quote dim guy as one of our multidimensional aspects. And we were okay with that because it's just a game. This is at least in the third and fourth dimensional reality, it's the illusion of polarity, of duality. In the big story, it's oneness, unity consciousness. There is no classic battle of good and evil. And so, you know, trying to, at that time, trying to maintain a position in consciousness in the big story, we considered the possibility that, you know, there could be a dim guy in somewhere in our cast of characters, in our multidimensional selves. And like I said, we were good with that. So listening to uh, this video yesterday, the practitioner said that he knows that there are like he asked how does that work in a walk-in prearranged condition, and the the client speaking through their larger self was saying that it's basically a pre-carnated a pre-incarnated agreement, which everything we do. This is why I always contend that you set this up. We all set this up. There are no accidents. There are no coincidences. Everything is purposeful. Whether we, in our small consciousness and perspective, can understand the big story, the big reason why, that's okay. It still is. It's the best model that I've always used in that. And you hear me say a lot about trust. Trust your higher self, trust your larger self. The best model that I've always used, and I'll quote the Bible. Uh, the Bible says we should have the faith of a little child. And think about this. When you're a child, you walk into a room and you hit the light switch. You expect the lights to come on. You didn't, before you walk into the room, you don't go run to your parents and ask, did you guys pay the electricity bill this month? Is the light going to come on when I walk in the room? No, you just have the faith in your parents whose house you live in and whose care you're under. You just have the faith that when you walk in the room, you hit the light switch and the light comes on. You walk in the kitchen and, you open the refrigerator, you generally expect food to be there. Granted, everybody's circumstances are different, and that is not either good or bad, but I'll just speak from my experience. I grew up in, middle class suburbia. I would go in the kitchen and open the refrigerator, and I expected food to be there. I didn't, before I opened the refrigerator, I didn't consult with my parents. Did you guys buy groceries this week? You know, uh, Yada yada yada. The same. You know the drill. The faith of a little child is that your parents care for you. They have your best interest in mind, and everything they do for you is for your good. And they will take care of business. Just like the model that I use with the human body. You have no awareness of this, no control over the autonomic systems in your body, but larger you, your father, your parent, whatever label you want to put on that larger aspect of you that has your best interest in mind, it's running the show. And you wake up you don't even think about it. You just have the faith of a little child. And that's, the Bible tells us, we should have the faith of a little child. So I think I got off track for a minute. No, anyway, so back to this video. So one of the in the process in answering the practitioner's question, the client basically used a model that I was in alignment with, made a lot of sense, and I felt right to me. And the model they used was like in wrestling. We're all on the same team. All of your selves are on the same team. And like when I walk in, and like tag team wrestling, you put your hand out, and one of your team members hits your hand, and then they come in the ring, and you go out the ring, and they continue the interaction. The wrestling match, whatever the interaction is. So they're on the same team, and they was using that model to explain how a walk-in. And like when I was sharing with uh, my interactions with my multiple higher aspects of my multidimensional self, I used basically the same thing. They came in, but it's like what I said in that video, it didn't feel like a walk-in because I didn't leave. Michael, never left. I just moved over into the passenger seat of the vehicle. And the incoming consciousness, the incoming aspect of me, that being sat in the driver's seat. But it was still basically the same, that we're all on the same team, which is how I got it and I related to it. So at the end of the video, like I said, it was just a short video. I wrote a comment, and in that comment is a story that I had intended on sharing eventually in in this series. And so I shared it in this comment, and I'm going to read it to you, and that will share the experience. And then also, I got 6 likes, 6 thumbs up, 6 likes on my story, on my comment, but I got one reply, and I'm going to read that one reply. So here, let me read. Okay, here's my comment to that video. People get upset, and this is true. People get upset with me when I contend that one cannot be possessed by a quote evil spirit. While masquerading as a long haul truck driver, I participated in a self quote exorcism end quote while driving a big truck at 65 miles an hour. After I expelled the entity and sent it to the light, I asked my larger self how long has it been in my field. The answer was since I was 3 years old, and that it was an aspect of my multidimensional self that volunteered to play that role. Its purpose was to keep me spiritually in check until I was spiritually advanced and strong enough to expel it. I initially asked, who was that? And I was told it went by the name Beelzebub. The illusion of, quote, good versus evil, end quote, only exist in the third and lower octaves of the 4D, of the 3D and lower octaves of the 4D. There truly is only one, and quote, all that is, end quote, is experiencing all that is. And that was, and like I said, I got 6 likes on that comment. And then here's the one person that replied to my comment, and they seem to have taken exception to it, which is why I want to. The basic part of this reason of this video is I want to share my perspective. Now, here was the reply. Maybe it was like that in your case, but possession from outside forces definitely exists. Regardless, this can also be viewed as an experience and a test for spiritual growth and awareness. Okay, I accept that because that's pretty much what it was. But it was not necessary. It was a test because I stated that being Beelzebub was in my field, voluntary on his part, and an accepting on my part, pre-incarnation agreement made by both of us, you know. And so it's like it wasn't a quote possession. But this person says, but possession exists. But possessions, how does she say it? But possession from outside forces definitely exists. Okay, I read that last night because I got an alert on my phone that somebody had commented to replied to my comment. So I read the reply, and as I was laying in bed last night, falling asleep, I was like, yeah, it's like I understood their perspective. And again, as I always say, these are my perspectives, and that's all they are. I'm not an outside authority, but this is my perspective. And so what I was going to say, and this I'm like in my head last night as I'm falling asleep, I'm like drafting a reply, and I was going to start it out, and I'll start it out here. By no means am I arguing with you. I honor and respect your position in consciousness. I honor and respect your right to your perspective, to your opinion. But that's all it is, your opinion. It's not definitive that that's the way that it is. It is your opinion, just as this is my opinion. And there's not a point of argument anywhere in that. Now, I wasn't going to word it all that, but I'm saying it because I'm saying it now. Uh, One of the things that I wanted to say, and I still might type out, a reply to her reply, but I realized today, thinking about it this morning, this is perfect opportunity for me to share this perspective in this video. So this is basically what I was going to say to her. Consider the possibility that the classic battle of good and evil is only in the third dimension and the lower aspects, the lower octaves of the fourth dimension, i.e., the small story. The big story is 5D and above, or you can say the higher octaves of the 4D, 5D, and above. In the big story, it's all unity consciousness. The quote, classic battle of good and evil does not exist. There is only one. And from that larger perspective, all that is experiencing all that is. All that is source is experiencing itself in an infinite myriad ways, infinite myriad aspects. To say you can be possessed by an outside force immediately speaks of separation. I'm separate from the rest of the universe. There's something in all that is that's separate from me. I'm separate from all that is. You remember the transitive law of equality? If A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. So if I'm part of all that is, and there's something else, if A is part of all that is, and B is part of all that is, then A and B are both part of all that is. There is no separation. It's just unity. And then again, that goes back to the paradox of the universe. Life is exquisite in the center of the paradox. There is no separation. Equal but different, but all the same. Everything in the entire universe is equal but different. All that is experiencing everything. Everything in the entire universe, all that is experiencing it. Source is experiencing source. In the infinite little illusions of separation. And then the third dimensional linear mind wants to go, well, that doesn't make sense. How can that be? Well, if you're all that is, you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can choose, if you're all that is, you can choose to experience all that is simply because you're all that is. Argue that from a small story perspective. You can't, because you just stay confined in the small story. That's why I call this video series the Big Story Gazette, because to the best of my ability, I will always speak from the big story. Now, granted, and it's something else that I wanted to share earlier. I'm not perfect. It's one of my jobs, and I set this up this way. I volunteered to do this. I was saying earlier in a previous video that I'm one of the first waivers, the baby boomers. We came in, and my light codes went off right around the harmonic convergence in 1988, and I really started initially engaging around 1990-91, and all through the early mid 90s and ever since. Okay, so but one of the things that I volunteered to do was to cut what Hilarious calls energetic pathways in consciousness, from the small story to the big story. And the model that I use to explain that is, in no way, shape, or form is this a military operation, but that's the best that I can use in 3D linear experience to convey what it is. You know how there's going to be, you have a mission. And the fact that I was in the military Marine Corps for 3 years, even though I didn't carry a pack and rifle, I worked on airplanes. But anyway, you'll understand this model. You know how when you have an objective, and you want to, for lack of a better phrase, and again, this is not this, but it's the best model that I can use, and all it is a model. Please understand. But you have an invasion, and you're going to invade this group over here. Well, you have your main force here, but the first thing you do is you send out reconnaissance teams. You send out the special forces. Matter of fact, in the Marine Corps, they're like the Army has the Delta Force, and you have the Green Berets, and you have that. In the Marine Corps, that group of people are called recon, forced recon. They're the special forces of the Marine Corps, Marine Corps infantry, and and they're small teams, and they go in quietly undercover. They and I can imagine there's this big jungle and thicket, and you got to cut a pathway with your machete, and you're hacking, and you're undercover, and you're hacking away, and you're cutting the trail. You're cutting the initial pathway. Well, that's what we do, because at least me, that was one of my jobs, and that's what I continue to do. And then when the pathways are cut and there's a direction to go, then the main force can follow behind much, much easier. Logistically, it's a lot easier to send a small force in first to cut the pathways through the jungle or the thicket or whatever you want to call it, and then the main force comes behind it. That's what me and a bunch of other of us as baby boomers, the first wavers that woke up, that's what we've been doing. We've been cutting pathways in consciousness and holding this energetic space, and we do it back and forth. The more you travel, you cut that pathway initially, and it can get overgrown real fast behind you, depending on how fast the jungle grows. But if you keep going back and forth, you refine and widen and clear that pathway so the main force can come through a lot easier. Well, that's one of the things that I do. Like I said, I'm not perfect. I go back and forth from the small story to the big story, the small story to the big story, and the tools that I've utilized that I got from Hilarious. Every time every time I go from the small story to the big story, I fine tune that pathway. I clean it up a little bit more so it makes it easier for the second and third wave to come through. The second and third wave are coming through now. The second wave for sure, i.e., you guys that are waking up now, that have been waking up in the last 10 to 12 years, you know, that are following, and you're following the pathways that us first wavers we've cut and held a space for you, an energetic space. And that doesn't make us bigger or better. We just, it was, that's how it was set up, how we all set it up. All of us worked together to set this up when we responded to the call, to Gaia's call. Okay? So to to say that to say that you can be possessed, and like I said, I don't argue with anybody, because I've had people uh, come against me on this, say no, that can't possibly be true. I know for a fact, like this person that commented to replied to my comment, said that possessions from outside forces are definite. I would be curious, and I would like to just sincerely, curiously, like to discuss with this person, how are you so definitive in your position? What experience do you have? And not to try to dissuade her or persuade her in any way, shape, or form, but just suggest to consider the possibility that you're speaking from the small story. From my perspective, she positively is speaking from the small story and not the big story. Because if something can be outside of me and possess me against my will, that's opposition. That's separation. That's polarization. That's not life exquisite in the center of the paradox. That's not incorporating the paradoxical nature of the universe in and of itself. So, that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Comment to her and and I would like to. I think I might write a little thing in response. Give the person my email address and tell them if it's yours to do, email me. I'd like to have a further dialogue, not to convince you, but just to talk, to share perspectives. If you're open to it and you respond to my invitation, cool. If not, have a nice life. Blessings on your journey. That's all I can say. Hold on a minute. I'll be right back, and then I'll close this out.